The distress beacon pierced through the cosmic void like a dying star's last scream. Captain Zura Vex of the Terran survey ship Prometheus watched the readings cascade across her neural interface, each pulse more desperate than the last. The signal originated from the Kepler 442 system, deep within what galactic cartographers had designated as the neutral zone, a buffer between the sprawling Galactic Confederation and the mysterious regions beyond known space. "Ma'am, the signal is using ancient Confederation protocols," reported Lieutenant Chun from the communications station. "But there's something odd about the encryption patterns. They're primitive, like they haven't been updated in over 3 centuries. Zara's weathered features creased into a frown. At 45, she had spent half her life among the stars, and primitive distress calls in the neutral zone usually meant one of 2 things: pirates using bait tactics or something far worse. The Prometheus was a science vessel, not a warship, but humanity had learned long ago that in space, the line between exploration and warfare was often razor-thin. "Analysis, Mr. Okafor," she asked her science officer. The tall Nigerian man's fingers danced over his console, pulling up spectral analysis and signal decomposition charts. "The beacon appears genuine, Captain. No hidden subroutines or malware signatures. The source is definitely artificial, a space station or a large vessel. But here's the interesting part. The energy signature suggests technology that predates human spaceflight by millennia." The bridge fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems. Every crew member understood the implications. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Confederation for barely 2 centuries, newcomers in a galaxy where some civilizations had achieved spaceflight when Earth's ancestors were still learning to use fire. Ancient technology usually meant encounters with one of the elder races, beings whose capabilities dwarfed modern understanding. "Set course for the signal source," Zara commanded. "But maintain full stealth protocols, and prep the quantum communicator. If this goes sideways, command needs to know immediately." The Prometheus was one of humanity's newest vessels, incorporating hard-learned lessons from decades of interstellar politics. Unlike the elegant, curved designs favored by most Confederation species, human ships were angular, bristling with redundant systems and armor plating. Other races often mocked humanity's paranoid engineering, but humans had learned that in a galaxy full of predators, paranoia kept you breathing. As they approached the Kepler 442 system, the crew worked with practiced efficiency. The ship's AI, Designation Atlas, continuously scanned for threats while maintaining their stealth field. The technology was humanity's greatest contribution to Confederation science, a fusion of Earth's military paranoia and alien quantum mechanics that rendered ships nearly invisible to most sensor arrays. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple energy signatures in the system," reported Ensign Patel from the sensor station. "One large stationary object, likely the source of the distress beacon. But there are also others, moving in formation. I count at least 50 vessels, possibly more." The main screen flickered to life, displaying a tactical overview of the system. At the center orbited a massive structure, clearly artificial, its geometric patterns defying conventional starship design. Around it, like sharks circling wounded prey, moved a fleet of sleek, predatory vessels. "Slavers," whispered Chun, his face pale. "Those are hegemony ships." The hegemony of spite was the galaxy's oldest nightmare, a confederation of species that had embraced conquest and subjugation as their primary philosophy. They had existed longer than recorded galactic history, expanding slowly but inexorably, consuming entire civilizations and adding their populations to vast slave armies. Most Confederation worlds have been founded by refugees fleeing hegemony expansion. "They're jamming the distress signal," Okafor reported, "trying to trace its origin. Whatever's broadcasting that beacon, they want it badly." Zara studied the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. The smart play was to retreat, report the hegemony presence to Confederation Command, and let the politicians decide how to respond. The Prometheus was fast and well-armed for a science vessel, but 50 hegemony warships would turn them to vapor in seconds. But then the beacon's message finally decoded, and everything changed. The voice that emerged from the speakers was hauntingly beautiful, melodic in a way that seemed to bypass the auditory cortex and speak directly to something deeper. Yet beneath the alien harmony lay unmistakable desperation. This is Sanctuary Station of the Vale Collective, broadcasting to any vessels capable of receiving this signal. We are under siege by hegemony forces. Our defenses are failing. Our children are dying. We have maintained this beacon for 300 cycles, hoping against hope that anyone, would hear our call. We know of the young race that calls itself humanity. Tales speak of your defiance of impossible odds. If any human vessels receive this transmission, we invoke the ancient right of sanctuary. Help us, please. We are all that remains of our people. The bridge atmosphere turned electric. Ancient right of sanctuary. Every spacefaring species knew the protocol, even if none had invoked it for millennia. It was more than a distress call. It was a formal request for protection that carried binding legal weight across the galaxy. To ignore it violated the deepest laws of civilized space. But more than that, something in the alien voice's desperation struck a chord with every human on the bridge. Throughout their history, humans have been the underdogs, the outcasts, the ones who survived against impossible odds. They recognized that sound in another species' voice. "Atlas, time to send a priority message to Fleet Command?" Zara asked. Assuming optimal quantum entanglement conditions, approximately 47 hours for round-trip communication, Captain, the AI replied in its calm, synthesized voice. Zara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of command settle on her shoulders like a familiar cloak. 47 hours. The station's defenses might not last 47 minutes against a concentrated hegemony assault. "Ma'am," Chen said quietly, "there's something else. I've been analyzing the hegemony fleet's formation. They're not attacking the station. They're waiting, like they're expecting something. On cue, space itself seemed to tear apart at the edge of the system. Massive tears in reality disgorged ships that dwarfed even the largest hegemony vessels. Cathedral-like structures of dark metal and malevolent energy. The new arrivals moved with predatory grace toward the besieged station. "Harvester ships," Okafor breathed. "Dear God, they're bringing in the harvesters." Everyone in human space knew the stories, though few believed them entirely. Harvesters were the hegemony's ultimate weapon, ships capable of literally consuming planets, breaking down matter at the atomic level and converting it into raw materials for their war machine. They appeared only when the hegemony intended to leave nothing behind, not even ruins. The alien voice from the station came again, weaker now, filled with the kind of resignation that only came from watching one's own extinction approach. "Sanctuary Station to any receiving vessels. We detect Harvester-class units entering our system. Our time is measured now in hours, not days. To whoever hears this message, remember us. Remember that we existed. Remember that we tried to preserve something beautiful in this galaxy of darkness. The Vale Collective dies with honor, but we die nonetheless." Zara opened her eyes and looked around the bridge at her crew. These were good people, trained professionals who had volunteered to push humanity's boundaries ever further into the unknown. They had families back on Earth, on Mars, on the dozen colony worlds that humanity now called home. They had no obligation to die for strangers in the void. But she could see it in their eyes, the same stubborn defiance that had carried humanity from the caves of Earth to the stars themselves. The same refusal to abandon hope that had seen them through the climate wars, the AI uprising, and their first disastrous contact with galactic civilization. "Mr. Chun, prepare a message torpedo," she commanded. "Full emergency priority to Fleet Command. Tell them we've located an active hegemony harvesting operation in the Kepler 442 system. Include all tactical data and emphasize the humanitarian crisis." "Aye, Captain." Ms. Patel, plot an intercept course for Sanctuary Station. Maximum stealth approach. The young ensign's hands hesitated over her console. "Captain, the hegemony fleet will detect us long before we can reach the station. We'll be vaporized." "Maybe," Zara acknowledged. "But maybe not. Humanity didn't get this far by choosing the safe path. And we're not about to start now." The Prometheus began its deadly approach, slipping through space like a ghost among sleeping giants. Behind them, the message torpedo launched toward the nearest quantum relay, carrying news that would shake the foundations of human space. What none of them could know was that their small act of defiance was about to trigger the largest military mobilization in human history. The message they sent would reach Admiral Sarah Chun Okafor, architect of humanity's defensive doctrine and grandmother to two of the Prometheus's crew members. Within hours of receiving the transmission, she would utter four words that would echo across the galaxy. Launch the Death Fleet. For 3 centuries, the galaxy had known humanity as explorers, traders, and reluctant diplomats. They were about to discover what humans became when someone threatened the innocent. The Prometheus continued its approach toward the besieged station, its crew unaware that they had just lit the fuse on the galaxy's deadliest powder keg. Above them, stars wheeled in their ancient courses, indifferent to the drama playing out in one small system. But across human space, klaxons were already beginning to sound as the Death Fleet prepared to remind the galaxy why humanity's homeworld was classified as a Class 12 Death World, and why that classification had never been revoked. In the depths of space, ancient hatred stirred. The hegemony had ruled through fear for millennia, crushing all who opposed them. They had never faced an enemy that had learned to make fear itself into a weapon. They were about to receive an education in terror, delivered with the compliments of Earth's finest. Admiral Sarah Chinook IV stood in the command center of Fortress Luna, humanity's primary military installation orbiting Earth's moon. At 68, she had survived 3 wars, 2 assassination attempts, and countless political battles, earning her position through a combination of tactical brilliance and sheer stubborn refusal to die. The emergency klaxons had been wailing for 12 minutes, ever since the quantum relay had delivered the Prometheus's message. Around her, the nerve center of human military might hummed with barely controlled chaos. Officers moved with practiced urgency between holographic displays showing fleet positions across 100 light-years of human space. The wall-mounted screens displayed streaming data from every human world, colony, and outpost, a real-time map of civilization's heartbeat. "Situation report," Sarah commanded, her voice cutting through the ambient noise like a blade. General Marcus Webb, her longtime friend and the head of strategic operations, materialized beside her as his hologram stabilized. He was broadcasting from the Titan shipyards, where humanity's largest vessels were constructed in the shadows of Saturn's rings. His weathered face showed the strain of the past few minutes. "The message is authentic," he began without preamble. "We've confirmed the Prometheus's quantum signature and cross-referenced their crew records. Captain Vex has 17 years of exemplary service, including 3 first-contact situations. If she says there are hegemony harvesters moving on civilians, I believe her." Sarah nodded grimly. She knew Zara Vex personally, had recommended her for command of the Prometheus after reviewing her service record. The woman was solid, reliable, and had never shown the kind of reckless heroism that got crews killed. "Fleet status?" Sarah asked. Admiral Yuki Tanaka, commander of the Home Defense Force, looked up from her tactical display. "Third Fleet is completing exercises in the Tau Ceti system. They can be at Kepler 442 in 18 hours. 7th Fleet is conducting anti-piracy operations in the Vega sector, 24 hours out. We could have a significant force in position within a day." "Not fast enough," Sarah said flatly. The Prometheus reported harvester-class vessels. "Once they begin the consumption process, it's irreversible. We need ships there now." The room fell silent except for the soft chiming of incoming data streams. Everyone present understood the implications. To reach Kepler 442 in time to matter, they would need to deploy humanity's most classified and controversial asset, the Death Fleet. General Webb's expression darkened. "Sarah, the Death Fleet hasn't been fully tested. The psychological conditioning of the crews alone has been deemed necessary by the Ethics Committee and approved by the Colonial Senate," Sarah interrupted. 57 votes to 3, with the opposition citing only procedural concerns. She turned to face the assembled officers, her gaze sweeping across faces that had become familiar over decades of service. These were the people who had built humanity's space-based military from a handful of converted mining vessels into a force that even the ancient Confederation powers respected. "Ladies and gentlemen, 3 hours ago we received credible intelligence of an active genocide being perpetrated by hegemony forces against a civilian population. The species in question has formally invoked sanctuary protocols, making this not just a moral obligation, but a legal one under Confederation law." Admiral Chen Martinez, the youngest flag officer present, raised her hand slightly. "Admiral, with respect, the Veil Collective isn't a Confederation member. Technically, sanctuary protocols don't apply. Technically, Sarah replied coldly, humanity wasn't a spacefaring species when the hegemony was founded. Technically, Earth should have been strip-mined for resources 2 centuries ago. Technically, we should all be dead. I've found that technicalities have a way of becoming irrelevant when facing extinction. She activated the central holographic display, bringing up a detailed schematic of the Death Fleet's composition. The assembled vessels looked nothing like traditional human ships. They were sleeker, more predatory, their dark hulls bristling with weapon systems that incorporated both human innovation and captured hegemony technology. The Death Fleet consists of 12 vessels, Sarah continued, each one crewed by volunteers who have undergone psychological conditioning to remove inhibitions regarding lethal force. Their ships are equipped with the most advanced weapons humanity has ever produced, including several systems that violate multiple Confederation treaties on ethical warfare. General Webb shifted uncomfortably. Sarah, deploying the Death Fleet, essentially declares war on the hegemony. Once that line is crossed, it's already been crossed, Sarah snapped. The only question is whether we cross it as conquerors or corpses. She had spent 30 years studying humanity's place in galactic politics, and the conclusions were invariably grim. The galaxy was dominated by species that had achieved spaceflight when Earth was still cooling from its formation. Humanity had been granted membership in the Confederation not out of respect, but out of pity, a gesture of charity toward a young race that showed promise but lacked the power to threaten established orders. That assessment was about to be catastrophically revised. Atlas, Sarah called to the facility's AI. Connect me with Captain Morrison aboard the Nemesis. The air above the central console shimmered and solidified into the image of Captain David Morrison, commanding officer of the Death Fleet's flagship. He appeared to be standing on his bridge, which was illuminated by the red combat lighting that human crews use during battle conditions. Morrison himself was a study in controlled lethality. Enhanced with military cybernetics, his eyes glowed faintly with the neural interfaces that connected him directly to his ship's weapon systems. Admiral, Morrison said simply. His voice carried the flat effect that was common among Death Fleet personnel, an emotional dampening that allowed them to function in situations that would break conventional soldiers. Captain, you've reviewed the situation at Kepler 442? Affirmative. Hegemony harvesting operation in progress against civilian targets. Estimated population at risk, 17 million sentients. Projected survival rate without intervention, 0%. Sarah felt a chill at the clinical precision in his voice. The psychological conditioning that made Death Fleet crews so effective also made them slightly inhuman, a trade-off that kept her awake at night, but seemed necessary in a galaxy full of predators. Your recommendation? Deploy immediately. The Nemesis and her escorts can reach the target system in 14 hours using emergency jump protocols. Probability of success against reported hegemony forces, 67% with acceptable losses. Define acceptable losses. Morrison's expression didn't change. Complete destruction of the Death Fleet would still represent an acceptable outcome if it prevents the harvesting operation and demonstrates humanity's commitment to protecting civilian populations. The room fell silent. Everyone present understood what Morrison had just said. He and his crews were prepared to die to save strangers they had never met. It was the kind of commitment that had made humanity famous across the galaxy, though whether that fame was positive or negative depended on who was asked. Sarah closed her eyes and felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. The decision she made in the next few minutes would determine not just the fate of 17 million Vale collective civilians, but potentially the entire future relationship between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. Captain Morrison, you are authorized for immediate deployment. Priority Alpha protocols are in effect. Save who you can, but ensure that the galaxy understands the consequences of threatening innocent life in humanity's presence. Morrison's image straightened slightly, the closest thing to emotion he was likely to display. Understood, Admiral. The Death Fleet will launch within the hour. As the connection terminated, Sarah turned to address the room at large. All fleet commanders, initiate condition read throughout human space. Begin recalling all ships to defensive positions around core worlds. If this escalates, the hegemony will likely retaliate against our civilian populations. The next hour passed in controlled chaos as humanity's military machine swung in a high gear. From the shipyards of Titan to the orbital fortresses around Alpha Centauri, ships began powering up weapons systems that had never been tested in actual combat. Throughout human space, families hugged goodbye as reserve forces were activated and civilian vessels were rerouted to safer systems. Deep in the classified sections of Fortress Luna, teams of technicians made final preparations to weapons that existed in violation of multiple galactic treaties. Quantum warheads, gravity bombs, and viral nanotechnology, weapons designed not just to destroy enemy ships, but to ensure that nothing remained that could threaten humanity's survival. The Death Fleet departed from the hidden base at Sharon exactly 57 minutes after receiving their orders. 12 ships that looked like nightmares given form, crewed by humans who had volunteered to become something more and less than human in order to protect their species. As they vanished into jump space, heading for a confrontation that would reshape galactic politics, Admiral Sarah Chinokafor remained in the command center, coordinating the largest military mobilization in human history. She thought about her granddaughter, Chun, aboard the Prometheus, alone in hostile space with only her courage and her crew's loyalty to protect her. She thought about 17 million civilians facing extinction at the hands of an ancient evil. And she thought about the choice she had just made to transform humanity from a minor galactic power into something that the galaxy's oldest civilizations would have no choice but to respect or fear. Outside the command center's viewports, Earth turned slowly in its eternal dance around the sun. On its surface, 8 billion humans went about their daily lives, unaware that their species had just declared war on the darkness that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. In 14 hours, the Death Fleet would arrive at Kepler 442 and remind the galaxy why humanity's homeworld was classified as a death world. The lesson would be written in fire across the cosmos. Captain Zura Vex pressed herself against the bulkhead of Sanctuary Station's central hub, the sound of distant explosions echoing through the alien corridors. The Prometheus had successfully docked with the massive structure 12 hours earlier, using their stealth systems to slip past the hegemony blockade. What they found inside had both horrified and inspired her. The Veil Collective was unlike any species humanity had encountered. They existed as pure energy beings capable of inhabiting various physical forms, their consciousness flowing like liquid light through crystalline matrices built into the station's walls. Their primary form resembled jellyfish made of starlight, beautiful and ethereal, but they could solidify into more substantial shapes when needed. Elder Lucy's, the collective's leader, materialized beside Zara in a cascade of silver radiance. When fully manifested, they appeared as a tall, graceful humanoid composed of flowing energy, their features shifting constantly like aurora in a night sky. Captain Vex, Lucy spoke, their voice a harmony of tones that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Your people have shown remarkable courage in coming to our aid, but I fear your sacrifice will be in vain. The hegemony has learned much about our defenses over the past 3 centuries. Our barriers will not hold much longer. Through the transparent walls of the station, Zara could see the hegemony fleet maintaining their siege formation. The massive harvester ships hung in space like metallic cancers, their whole surfaces crawling with mechanical appendages designed to break apart matter at the molecular level. Smaller warships patrolled the perimeter, their weapons trained on Sanctuary Station's increasingly fragile energy shields. Elder, my ship detected quantum communications traffic heading toward Confederation space, Zara said. Our people know what's happening here. Help is coming. Lucy's form flickered, dimming noticeably. How long before this help arrives? I don't know, but I know my people. They don't abandon allies. Lieutenant Chun approached from the station's command center, his face grim. Captain, I've been working with their technicians to boost the distress signal. We managed to punch through the jamming for about 30 seconds before they adapted. But something interesting happened. Right before the signal cut out, we detected multiple jump signatures at the edge of the system. Big ones. Zara felt her heart race. Ours. The quantum signatures match human technology, but Chun hesitated. Ma'am, these aren't any ships I recognize from the fleet registry. The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever's coming, it's something new. Across the station, alarms began sounding in harmonious chords that somehow conveyed urgency despite their beauty. Through the walls, Zara could see hegemony forces beginning to move. The predatory warships were adjusting their positions, forming attack formations. They've detected the new arrivals, Lucy's observed, their form brightening slightly with what might have been hope. The hegemony is moving to intercept. The main display wall shifted to show tactical data, as the station's sensors tracked the developing situation. At the edge of the system, space itself seemed to tear open as ships emerged from jump space. But these weren't the familiar angular forms of Confederation vessels. Instead, they were sleek, dark shapes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Jesus Christ, whispered Ensign Patel, who had insisted on accompanying the away team despite Zara's protests. Look at the size of those things. The lead vessel was massive, easily 3 times the length of the largest Confederation dreadnought. Its hull was matte black, broken only by lines of red illumination that pulsed like a heartbeat. As it moved through space, smaller ships took up escort positions around it, their formations precise and predatory. "This is impossible," Chen muttered, consulting his scanner readings. According to these scans, that lead ship masses more than some asteroids, but it's moving like a fighter craft. The power requirements alone should be. His words were cut off as the comm system crackled to life with a transmission that sent chills down every human spine. Hegemony forces. This is Captain David Morrison of the Terran vessel Nemesis. You are ordered to immediately cease all hostile actions against Sanctuary Station and withdraw from this system. This is your only warning. The voice was flat, emotionless, carrying the kind of certainty that only came from someone who had moved beyond fear or doubt. Zara had heard rumors about Special Forces units that underwent psychological conditioning, but she had never heard anything like this. The hegemony's response was predictable and swift. The nearest warship, a kilometer-long Predator called a Devourer-class cruiser, rotated its primary weapons toward the human fleet and fired. The beam that erupted from the hegemony ship was pure, concentrated energy, the kind of weapon that could slag a city in seconds. It struck the Nemesis dead center and simply disappeared. The human vessel's hull absorbed the impact without so much as a scorch mark, continuing its steady advance toward the enemy fleet. "Impossible," breathed one of the Veil collective technicians. "No known armor can withstand a Devourer's main gun." Captain Morrison's voice came over the comm again, still flat and mechanical. "Warning acknowledged and ignored. Initiating response protocols." What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. The Nemesis didn't return fire with conventional weapons. Instead, space around the hegemony cruiser began to change. Reality seemed to twist and buckle as something fundamental about physics was violated. The cruiser's hull began to tear apart from the inside out, as if something was rewriting the basic forces holding its atoms together. Within seconds, the massive warship collapsed into a sphere of supercompressed matter no larger than a basketball, then winked out of existence entirely. "Gravity implosion weapon," Chen whispered in horrified fascination. They turned it into a micro-black hole. The hegemony fleet's response was immediate and overwhelming. 50 warships opened fire simultaneously, filling space with enough destructive energy to sterilize a small planet. The human ships didn't attempt to evade. They simply absorbed the punishment while continuing their advance. And then, the Death Fleet showed the galaxy what humans had learned about warfare. The escorts around the Nemesis opened up with weapons that defied classification. Beams of coherent gravity, shredded hegemony shields, and hulls alike. Quantum torpedoes phased through armor as if it didn't exist before detonating inside enemy ships. Most terrifyingly, some of the human vessels deployed swarms of nanomachines that turned enemy hulls into gray dust within minutes. But it was the Nemesis itself that truly demonstrated humanity's new approach to warfare. As it closed with the main hegemony formation, its hull began to unfold like a mechanical flower. What had appeared to be a single massive vessel revealed itself as a weapons platform of staggering complexity. Quantum cannons emerged from hidden recesses, each one capable of deleting matter from existence. Gravity projectors created localized distortions that crushed enemy ships like tin cans. And from the ship's core emerged something that made even the battle-hardened hegemony veterans hesitate. A weapon that seemed to tear holes in space itself, exposing the roiling chaos of the quantum foam beneath reality. "What are they?" Lucy's asked in wonder and terror. Zara watched the display with growing horror and pride. "They're what we become," she said quietly. When someone threatens the innocent. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, the entire hegemony fleet had been reduced to expanding clouds of metallic debris. The massive harvester ships, supposedly impregnable fortress vessels, lay broken and powerless, their molecular disassemblers turned against their own hulls. In the aftermath, as human ships moved to secure the area, Captain Morrison's voice returned to the comm system. Sanctuary Station, this is the Nemesis. Please prepare to receive medical and engineering teams. We'll have you back to full operational status within 6 hours. Elder Lucy's form shimmered with what could only be described as stunned gratitude. Captain Morrison, the Veil Collective owes humanity a debt that spans lifetimes. How can we ever repay such courage? Morrison's response was characteristically direct. No payment required. Protecting civilian populations from extinction is not negotiable for humanity. However, we would appreciate your testimony regarding hegemony operations in this region when this matter reaches the Confederation Council. As human shuttles began docking with Sanctuary Station, bringing medical supplies and engineering teams, Zara felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride in her species' response to the crisis, horror at the implications of the weapons she had just witnessed, and, underneath it all, a growing certainty that the galaxy was about to change in ways no one could predict. Captain, Chin said quietly, approaching her with a datapad. I've been analyzing the battle recordings. The weapons the Death Fleet used, some of them are theoretically impossible according to our current understanding of physics. Meaning humanity has been developing technologies in secret that make us potentially the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The question is, what else don't we know about our own military capabilities? Through the station's transparent walls, Zara watched human ships taking up protective positions around Sanctuary Station. In the distance, the scattered remains of the hegemony fleet served as a grim reminder that the galaxy's ancient balance of power had just shifted dramatically. What none of them realized was that news of the battle was already spreading across quantum communication networks, reaching every major power in the galaxy. The Confederation Council would be in emergency session within hours. Ancient species that had slumbered for millennia would begin stirring in their deeper doubts. And, in the darkest reaches of hegemony space, rulers older than recorded history would begin to reassess their opinion of the young species from the death world called Earth. The galaxy had just learned that humanity was no longer content to be civilization's charity case. They were about to discover what that meant for everyone else. The Confederation Council chamber had not seen such chaos in over 8 centuries. Representatives from 47 different species filled the vast amphitheater, their various forms creating a tapestry of biological diversity that spanned from crystalline entities to gas cloud intelligences. But for the first time in recorded history, every delegate was focused on the same terrifying question. What exactly had humanity become? Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the central podium, her human form dwarfed by the ancient architecture around her. At 35, she was by far the youngest representative ever to address a full council session. But the circumstances were unprecedented. The holographic displays surrounding her showed tactical recordings from the Kepler 442 system, images that had already been classified as state secrets by several major governments. Honorable delegates, Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic enhancement systems. I stand before you today not to justify humanity's actions, but to explain them. 43 hours ago, my species received a distress call from the Veil Collective, a non-Confederation civilization facing extinction at the hands of hegemony forces. She paused as murmurs rippled through the assembly. The tall, insectoid Kuruk delegate raised one of its mantis-like arms. Ambassador Vasquez, humanity acted unilaterally, without Confederation authorization or consultation. This violation of established protocols is superseded by the Sanctuary Doctrine as established in the Third Galactic Accords, Elena interrupted smoothly. Any species facing genocide may invoke protection from any spacefaring civilization capable of providing aid. The doctrine predates Confederation membership protocols by 6,000 years. Elder Threnody of the Ashkari, one of the galaxy's oldest surviving civilizations, leaned forward in their crystalline support matrix. Their voice resonated with harmonics that had witnessed the rise and fall of a dozen galactic powers. Young human. The sanctuary doctrine has not been invoked in millennia because no one has possessed the military capability to honor it against a force like the hegemony. Your species has been part of galactic civilization for less than 3 centuries. How do you possibly possess such weapons? Elena had been dreading this question, but also preparing for it. The truth would fundamentally alter humanity's relationship with every other species in the galaxy. The lie would only delay the inevitable revelation. Elder Threnody, honored delegates, humanity has spent the past century engaged in what we term accelerated military development. Our research priorities have been guided by a simple principle. Never again will we be helpless in the face of extinction. The chamber erupted in excited chatter as translators worked overtime to convey the implications across dozens of different communication methods. The Xantharian delegate, a floating mass of bioluminescent tentacles, pulsed urgently. Are you stating that humanity has been secretly developing weapons of mass destruction in violation of the technological limitation accords? I am stating, Elena replied carefully, that humanity has developed defensive technologies deemed necessary for species survival. The classification of these technologies as weapons or tools depends entirely on their application. Ambassador Kethvar of the proud Vraxian Empire stood to his full 8-foot height, his scale hide rippling with agitation. The Vraxians were one of the few species that could match humans for aggression, though they channeled it into elaborate honor duels rather than total warfare. You speak in riddles, human. Show us what your people have become. Elena nodded to her aide, who activated the chamber's central holographic display. The images that appeared were taken from multiple perspectives during the battle at Kepler 442, hegemony sensor logs, Veil collective recordings, and transmissions from the human ships themselves. The chamber fell silent as they watched the Nemesis absorb weapons fire that should have destroyed it instantly. The silence deepened as they witnessed gravity weapons compress enemy ships into microscopic points of light. And when the recording showed the quantum foam weapons tearing holes in space itself, several delegates retreated to the farthest edges of their seats. "This is impossible," whispered Counselor Yith of the Machine Intelligence Collective. "These technologies violate the fundamental physical laws that govern our understanding of reality." "No," Elena corrected, "they violate your current understanding of those laws. Humanity has had the advantage of approaching galactic science from the perspective of a species that evolved in constant conflict. Where other civilizations saw natural limits, we saw engineering challenges." The images continued, showing the methodical destruction of the hegemony fleet. But Elena noticed something else in the recordings, the precise, almost surgical way the human weapons operated. Ships were disabled rather than obliterated when possible. The massive harvester vessels had been neutralized without causing the explosive chain reactions that could have devastated the system. "Observe," she continued, "that despite possessing overwhelming firepower, our forces showed restraint. No necessity destruction. No targeting of escape pods. The 17 million Veil collective civilians were evacuated to safety within 12 hours of our arrival. This is not the behavior of conquerors. It is the behavior of protectors." Elder Threnity's crystalline form chimed softly, the Oshkari equivalent of thoughtful consideration. "You speak truth, young human. But protection and conquest often differ only in perspective. How do we know that humanity will not turn these weapons against former allies when your interests diverge from ours?" Elena had hoped the question wouldn't arise, but she had prepared for it as well. Because, Elder Threnody, humanity's greatest strength has never been our weapons. It has been our ability to recognize kinship with other species facing extinction. She gestured toward the gallery where non-voting observers sat. Among them were representatives from 24 species that humanity had aided over the past century, colonies struggling with environmental disasters, trade convoys attacked by pirates, research stations cut off by cosmic phenomena. Every species in this chamber has, at some point in their history, faced a crisis that threatened their survival, Elena continued. Humanity understands that feeling with a clarity that apparently disturbs many of you. We have faced extinction multiple times, from environmental collapse, from our own technological development, from first contact with galactic civilization. We survived not through conquest, but through cooperation and an absolute refusal to abandon hope. Ambassador Kethvar leaned forward aggressively. "Pretty words, human, but you have just demonstrated that your species possesses planet-killing weapons. What prevents you from using them to expand your territory or eliminate competing interests? Elena smiled, and for the first time since entering the chamber, she looked genuinely relaxed. Ambassador Kethvar, humanity already possesses 12 worlds capable of supporting billions of people. Our birth rates are declining due to improved quality of life. Our resource needs are met through asteroid mining and stellar collection. We have no interest in conquering additional territory because we have no need for it. What we cannot tolerate is the systematic extermination of intelligent life by those who view genocide as a convenient tool of expansion. The chamber fell silent as delegates processed this information. For species that had spent millennia competing for resources and territory, the concept of a civilization that had moved beyond such concerns was genuinely alien. It was Counselor Yith who broke the silence. You're stating that humanity has achieved post-scarcity economics and population stability. If this is true, what do you want from the galaxy? Elena's expression grew serious. We want what we have always wanted, to explore, to learn, to help where we can, and to ensure that no species faces extinction alone. The Death Fleet exists not as a tool of expansion, but as a guarantee that genocidal actions will face consequences regardless of the perpetrator's power. The implications of her words rippled through the assembly like a shockwave. For millennia, species had survived by avoiding conflict with powers greater than themselves. Humanity was suggesting a galaxy where genocidal actions would be punished regardless of political considerations. This is naive idealism, declared Ambassador SEK Tor of the Hegemony Client State Devourers Union. The galaxy operates on the principle of survival of the fittest. The strong take what they need from the weak. This has been the natural order for millions of years. Elena's eyes hardened. Ambassador SEK Tor, that natural order has just encountered a species that refuses to accept it. The hegemony has spent millennia believing that superior firepower grants them the right to exterminate entire civilizations. Yesterday, they learned that they no longer possess superior firepower. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. SEK Tor's reptilian features twisted into what might have been a snarl. Are you threatening the hegemony, human? I am informing them, Elena replied calmly, that the age of consequence-free genocide has ended. Any species, organization, or government that attempts to systematically exterminate intelligent life will face the combined response of human military forces. This is not a threat. It is a statement of policy. Elder Thrinity's chimes grew more complex, expressing deep thoughtfulness. Young human, you are proposing to fundamentally alter the balance of power that has maintained galactic stability for eons. What makes you believe that your species is qualified to serve as, what is the term, galactic police? Elena stood straighter, drawing on reserves of confidence that came from representing a species that had clawed its way from cave paintings to starships in less than 10,000 years. Elder Threnody, we are not proposing to police the galaxy. We are proposing to protect it. There is a significant difference. She activated a new display showing current galactic political maps. Look at these territories marked as lost regions, star systems that once supported intelligent life, but are now barren due to hegemony expansion. 47 civilizations in the past millennium alone. Billions of beings who might have contributed art, science, philosophy to galactic culture, but who were instead reduced to raw materials for someone else's expansion. The chamber remained silent, but Elena could sense the shift in attention. For the first time, delegates were truly considering the cumulative cost of the galaxy's current power structure. Humanity proposes a simple principle, she continued. The right of intelligent species to exist supersedes the right of any government to expand. We will provide protection to any civilization facing extinction, regardless of their political affiliations or economic value. This protection will be funded by humanity and administered according to Confederation humanitarian protocols. Ambassador Kethvar's expression had shifted from hostility to something resembling respect. And if the Confederation votes to reject this proposal? Elena smiled again, but this time there was steel in her expression. Then, humanity will implement it unilaterally. We have demonstrated that we possess the military capability to do so, and we have stated our moral obligation to protect innocent life. The only question is whether the Confederation chooses to participate in creating a more just galaxy or whether we proceed without your assistance. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates began arguing among themselves in dozens of different languages and communication methods. But Elena noticed that no one was arguing against the principle. They were debating implementation, oversight, and the practical implications of a galaxy where genocide carried guaranteed consequences. As the session devolved into caucusing and side negotiations, Elena realized that humanity had just crossed a threshold that could never be uncrossed. They were no longer the junior members of galactic civilization, grateful for acceptance and careful not to offend their betters. They had become the species that other civilizations would need to account for in their decision-making processes. And, judging by the expressions on the faces around her, that realization was both terrifying and oddly comforting to beings who had spent their entire existence living in fear of forces beyond their control. 6 months after the Kepler 442 incident, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy new equilibrium. Captain Zura Vex stood on the observation deck of Sanctuary Station, now transformed into a thriving hub of interspecies cooperation. Through the transparent walls, she watched ships from dozens of civilizations coming and going, refugees seeking protection, scientists eager to study Veil collective energy manipulation techniques, and diplomats negotiating the new treaties that were reshaping galactic politics. The Veil Collective had recovered remarkably well from their near extinction. Their energy-based physiology allowed for rapid regeneration, and the 17 million survivors had quickly rebuilt their population to over 30 million. More importantly, they had become humanity's first formal allies, sharing technologies that had accelerated human scientific advancement by decades. Captain Vex came a familiar harmonic voice behind her. Elder Lucy's materialized in their preferred form, a tall, graceful figure of shifting silver light. I bring news from the Confederation Council. The Sanctuary Accords have been ratified by 31 of the 47 member species. Zara turned from the viewport, smiling at her unlikely friend. The months of cooperation had taught her to read Veil collective emotional expressions, and Lucy's was practically glowing with satisfaction. And the holdouts? Predictably, most are hegemony client states or species with expansionist philosophies. However, the Oshkari Council has voted to support the Accords, which carries significant weight among the elder races. The Sanctuary Accords represented the most significant shift in galactic law in millennia. Building on humanity's original proposal, they established formal protocols for protecting endangered civilizations, funded by a coalition of species, and enforced by a joint fleet commanded by human officers, but crewed by volunteers from across the galaxy. Any word from our people about the new fleet compositions? Zara asked. Lucy's form flickered with amusement. Admiral Chinokafor reports that they have more volunteers than ship berths. It seems that many species have been waiting for someone to offer them a chance to matter in galactic politics. The Vraxians alone have contributed 12,000 experienced warriors. Through the station's communication systems, Zara could hear the constant chatter of construction crews working on the facility's expansion. Sanctuary Station was being converted into the galaxy's first multinational refugee processing center, capable of temporarily housing millions of beings while permanent solutions were found. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority transmission. The wall display activated, showing Admiral Sarah Chinokafor broadcasting from Earth. The older woman looked tired, but satisfied, the expression of someone who had seen a difficult job through to completion. Zara, I hope you're ready for another assignment, Sarah said without preamble. We've received 3 more sanctuary requests in the past week. The word is spreading that there are finally consequences for genocide. Where are we heading this time, Admiral? The Raxus system. A species called the Delphi Collective is being systematically hunted by hegemony advanced forces. Preemptive extermination to prevent them from developing spaceflight. The bastards are getting nervous about more species achieving interstellar capability. Zara felt the familiar surge of anger that came with hearing about systematic extermination. Force composition. Smaller operation this time. Only 2 hegemony battle groups. The 3rd Sanctuary Fleet will handle it, with support from Vraxian Honor Guards and Oshkari Technical Specialists. Estimated arrival time, 36 hours. The efficiency of the response would have been unimaginable 6 months earlier. The galaxy's first multinational rapid response force, equipped with weapons that made traditional military doctrine obsolete, could now deploy to any threatened system within days rather than months. What about the political situation? Zara asked. Are the hegemony client states starting to distance themselves? Sarah's expression grew satisfied. 7 client states have formally requested Confederation membership in the past month. The hegemony's expansion has slowed to nearly zero as their tributary species realize they have other options. More importantly, we've intercepted communications suggesting significant internal discord within hegemony leadership. Elder Lucy's stepped closer to the display. Admiral, the Veil Collective's deep space monitors have detected unusual activity in the hegemony core systems. Large fleet movements toward their capital region. They may be consolidating forces for a major offensive. Sarah nodded grimly. We've seen the same intelligence. The hegemony has ruled the galaxy for millennia through fear and superior firepower. Their entire civilization is built on the assumption that they can take whatever they want without facing meaningful resistance. Our existence threatens the foundation of their society. So they're planning something big, Zara concluded. Almost certainly. Our analysts believe they're preparing for total war, an attempt to eliminate humanity as a threat before we can expand our influence further. The problem is that they don't understand what they're actually facing. Through the viewport, Zara watched a human destroyer escort a convoy of refugee ships toward the station's docking bays. The destroyer was one of the new designs, sleeker than the traditional angular human vessels, incorporating Veil collective energy management systems and Oshkari quantum computing cores. It represented the best of multiple civilizations working together. Admiral, how many ships does the hegemony have available for a full mobilization? Zara asked. Conservative estimates suggest over 10,000 warships, including approximately 50 Harvester-class vessels. It's the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Elder Lucy's form dimmed slightly. Such a force could sterilize hundreds of worlds simultaneously. Even with our new technologies, humanity cannot face such numbers alone. Sarah's smile was predatory. Elder Lucy's, that assessment assumes we would fight using conventional tactics. The hegemony has made a fundamental error in their planning. They think this is still the same galaxy they've ruled for millennia. A new voice joined the conversation as Captain Morrison appeared in a secondary display. His emotionless features showed no change, but Zara had learned to read the subtle indicators that revealed the Death Fleet commander's thoughts. Admiral, we have completed integration testing of the new cooperative technologies. Effectiveness estimates have increased by 400% over original projections. Explain for our friends, Captain, Sarah requested. Morrison's image shifted slightly as he accessed data files. The Veil Collective's energy manipulation capabilities, combined with Oshkari quantum processing and human weapons systems, have produced results that exceed the sum of their parts. Our latest vessels can literally rewrite the laws of physics within localized regions of space. Time dilation, gravity negation, selective matter conversion, technologies that would have been considered impossible 6 months ago. Zara felt a chill of excitement and fear. Are you saying we've developed reality-altering weapons? In essence, yes. However, these systems require cooperation between human, Veil Collective, and Oshkari consciousness types to function. They cannot be operated by any single species. This built-in safeguard prevents their use for conquest or genocide. Elder Lucy's pulsed with understanding. A remarkable solution. Weapons powerful enough to deter any aggressor, but incapable of being used for aggressive purposes. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. Ladies and gentlemen, the hegemony is about to discover that their massive fleet advantage is meaningless when facing opponents who can manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. But, more importantly, they're about to learn that they're no longer fighting against individual species. They're fighting against the collective moral will of the galaxy's civilized worlds. A priority alert interrupted the conversation as new data streams flooded into the station's communication systems. Zara watched the tactical displays update with information from deep space monitoring stations across human territory. Admiral, reported a technician's voice over the comm. We're detecting massive energy signatures throughout hegemony space. They're beginning their mobilization. Sarah stood, her expression shifting into the cold determination that had made her humanity's most feared military commander. All stations, this is Admiral Chinokafor. Condition Red is now in effect throughout human space. All civilian traffic is to proceed immediately to designated safe zones. All military units are to assume defensive positions and await further orders. She turned back to the display. Zara, you're going to want to expedite your current mission. If the hegemony is mobilizing their entire military, they're planning something that makes genocide look like a minor diplomatic incident. The next few hours passed in controlled chaos as the galaxy's communication networks carried news of the largest military mobilization in recorded history. Species that had remained neutral in galactic politics for millennia began choosing sides. Ancient civilizations that had withdrawn from galactic affairs centuries ago started transmitting to their embassies for the first time in generations. But, perhaps most significantly, the message that Elder Lucy's received from the deepest reaches of space changed everything anyone thought they knew about the galaxy's true power structure. Captain Vex, Lucy's said, their form flickering with barely contained excitement. I have just received a transmission from the archives, the collective consciousness of species that achieved transcendence millennia ago. They have been watching our conflict with great interest. What do they want? Zara asked, though she suspected the answer would be both wonderful and terrifying. They want to help. It seems that the galaxy's transcended civilizations have grown tired of watching younger species suffer under hegemony rule. They are prepared to offer assistance to any coalition dedicated to ending systematic genocide. The implications hit Zara like a physical blow. Species that had moved beyond physical existence, whose technological capabilities were so advanced they might as well be gods, were offering to join the fight against the hegemony. What kind of assistance? She asked quietly. Lucy's form brightened until it was almost too intense to look at directly. The kind that will make our current weapons look like stone knives. Captain, I believe the hegemony's war is about to encounter forces they never knew existed. As Sanctuary Station continued its preparations for war, Zara looked out at the stars and realized that the galaxy was about to witness the end of an era. For millennia, the hegemony had ruled through fear and superior force. They were about to face an alliance that included not just the galaxy's most aggressive newcomers, but its most ancient and powerful transcended civilizations. The age of consequence-free genocide was ending not with a whimper, but with the combined fury of every species that had ever suffered under tyranny. And at the center of it all, one small blue world continued its ancient orbit around an unremarkable yellow star, home to the species that had refused to accept that might makes right. The galaxy would never be the same.